talking about my trauma. On vacay, I got too drunk and slept with a random stranger from the club. Then he did this. Hey Reddit, I've wanted to post this for a while now, but it took me a while until I actually got strong enough to talk about it. Things are still in the works, that is, the divorce is still in the works, but I felt like talking about it would make me feel better. I'm here to talk about my trauma today, Reddit. I made a very huge mistake. I got drunk even when I knew that I could not handle my alcohol, and then I slept with random strangers from the club. Of course, my husband found out. My name is Kim, and my husband's name, or should I say ex-husband's name, is Richard. Richard and I have been married for about 2 years now, but we've been together for a very long time. We met in high school and started dating almost immediately. Senior year of high school, to be precise. Richard was very, very popular. Everyone liked him. He was captain of the football team and was an all-general, very fun person to be around, plus he was also from a wealthy family, which meant a lot of people wanted to hang out with him. I was quite the opposite, even though I could be quite friendly and nice. I was very quiet and hence I didn't have a lot of friends. Even now at adulthood, I still don't really have a lot of friends as I never developed any long-lasting friendships both in college and in high school, due to my shyness and inability to approach others. So back then when Richard approached me, showed an interest in me and wanted to be my friend, I was excited. He was my first friend ever. I'm 30 years old and Richard is 31. We've been through a lot together, but nothing compares to the mess I made with my drunken escapade. Now I'm here to share my story, hoping that someone out there can learn from my mistakes or maybe offer some advice on how to navigate through this mess I've created. So here it goes, I guess. Richard's perspective on marriage was always quite different from mine. He thought it was just a fancy piece of paper that didn't change much about our relationship. He never saw it as a necessity, more like an optional formality. For him, our love was what mattered, not a legal document. I, on the other hand, had dreamed of a grand wedding since I was a little girl. I wanted to wear a white dress, say my vows, and all the festivities surrounding it. It was more than just a piece of paper. For me, it was about celebrating our love with our families and friends. Another one of the reasons I pushed for marriage was our son. He was 5 years old at the time, and I wanted him to witness our union officially. I didn't want him growing up questioning why mommy and daddy weren't legally married. It was important for me that he saw us as a complete family unit. Richard initially wasn't keen on the idea. He believed in our commitment to each other without the need for a marriage certificate. He was content with our engagement and our life together. It took some convincing, but eventually he understood how much it meant to me. He came around and agreed to tie the knot, not because he saw marriage the same way I did, but because he loved me and wanted to make me happy. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, though Richard wasn't heavily involved in the planning. It was my dream, so I took charge of most aspects. His family, however, had mixed feelings about it. They were polite but distant, not exactly warm or welcoming. They were nice enough, but you could tell they weren't jumping for joy about our marriage. I knew that they didn't fully approve of me, maybe because I came from a middle-class background while they were more affluent, and no matter how much I tried to, they politely shunned all my attempts to build a relationship with them. During the wedding planning, Richard's parents started to subtly suggest a prenuptial agreement. They framed it as a precaution, but of course I couldn't help but feel a bit judged. It felt like they were questioning my intentions. Signing it felt like my own way of proving my intentions were genuine, that I wasn't after Richard's wealth. At that time, I was willing to do anything to gain their approval, even if it meant signing a document that could potentially complicate things later on. I agreed to it because I thought it would show I was serious about Richard and not his wallet. Looking back now, I see how silly it was to think signing a piece of paper would change their minds about me. But back then, I was eager to fit in and prove myself. Now with the divorce looming and that prenup staring me in the face, I realized that I might have made a huge mistake. Richard and I had a rock-solid relationship based on respect, trust, and honest conversations. From our dating days to our married life, Richard and I were on the same page about communication and effort in our relationship. We were mature enough to handle disagreements without letting them spiral out of control. Talking things out was very crucial for us. We didn't hide anything from each other and always shared our thoughts and feelings openly. Decision-making was a joint effort. We made sure to consult each other on important matters and considered each other's opinions unless it was something minor we knew wouldn't bother the other. We understood that nurturing a relationship meant being romantic and thoughtful, like planning dates, movie nights, and special evenings together. Richard often put in more effort than me, but I did my best too. Things took a turn when Richard's dad started talking about retirement. Their family business was more than just successful. It was Richard's heritage. a legacy he was expected to carry forward as the only child, and that meant the responsibility of running the company fell squarely on his shoulders. The pressure was intense, and Richard's workload skyrocketed as he took on more projects and responsibilities. The transition wasn't smooth. Richard's dad seemed eager to pass on responsibilities quickly, perhaps too quickly. It felt like he couldn't wait to be done with the CEO role. As a result, Richard found himself buried under a mountain of projects and decisions, and they were each demanding his immediate attention. He was always busy with meetings, strategy sessions, and overseeing various aspects of the business. This shift in dynamics hit me hard. As a stay-at-home mom, Richard was not only my husband, but also my main companion and only close friend. With his new responsibilities, our time together became scarce. We no longer had movie nights or random outings, and they were all replaced by late-night meetings and early morning calls. The busyness also took a toll on Richard. He seemed constantly stressed and preoccupied. I was now managing our son and household responsibilities largely on my own, which was a significant adjustment since previously Richard was very hands-on in the house. He took on a lot of chores and would always help. Our son was also more of a daddy's boy and was very attached to Richard. I understood the pressure Richard was under. He had to balance family expectations, business demands, and his personal life. But it was tough for me. I missed our long conversations, our laughter, and the simple joy of spending uninterrupted time together. The lack of time together was beginning to strain our connection. All we ever talked about now were schedules and responsibilities. Despite the challenges, of course, I tried to support Richard in every way I could. I took on more responsibilities at home to ease his workload. I encouraged him when he felt overwhelmed and celebrated his successes. Richard wasn't blind to the strain our relationship was under. He saw how much things had changed and how distant we had become. He was genuinely sorry, and he made sure to express it repeatedly. He assured me that once this stressful and hectic transition period at work was over, and he settled into his new role, he would prioritize spending more quality time with us at home. His intentions were sincere. He didn't want our son to feel neglected, so every spare moment he had was dedicated to our little family, no matter how short those moments were. We tried to make those moments count, but deep down I was feeling more and more isolated. Even though Richard was doing his best, I couldn't shake off this heavy loneliness. I felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally, from shouldering most of the household responsibilities while he was wrapped up in work. His constant apologies and pledges to change helped a bit, but they didn't fill the void of not having someone to talk to, laugh with, or share daily life experiences. As Richard settled into his new role at work and became more present at home, there was this noticeable shift in our dynamic. We couldn't help but feel a bit resentful towards his father for the chaos we had to endure during the transition. Richard had never really been given the chance to dive deep into the company's operations or learn the ropes from his father. So when the time came for him to take charge, it was like diving into deep waters without a life jacket. Despite the strained atmosphere lingering between us, Richard made an effort to bridge the gap. He suggested taking a vacation during the upcoming holidays. He also suggested leaving our son with his mom, who was more than happy to spend time with her grandson. Richard proposed a week-long getaway to a place of my choice, and he emphasized that it would be a great way for us to reconnect and unwind from the stresses of daily life. He mentioned that the holiday timing would be perfect since our son wouldn't miss school, and my mother-in-law wouldn't have to worry about dropping him off. It was a very thoughtful gesture, considering the recent changes in our lives, especially since Richard's parents, who said they felt they were getting older, downsized, and moved to a smaller house farther away from us. The idea of a vacation sounded appealing. I felt like it would be a chance to escape the tension that had been building up and find some much-needed peace and intimacy. It felt like a step towards rebuilding our connection and leaving the past frustrations behind us. But the thing is, if I had known what would go down, I would have never gone on that vacation. Hawaii had always been on my bucket list. I'd heard so many amazing things about it, from the stunning beaches to the vibrant culture. So when the holidays rolled around and Richard suggested we go on a vacation to anywhere I wanted, I was beyond excited. We dropped off our son with my in-laws, who were more than happy to have him, and then we jetted off to Hawaii for what we hoped would be a much-needed break. We landed in Hawaii to warm breezes and the sweet scent of tropical flowers, and it instantly put us in vacation mode. Our accommodation was right by the beach, and it had a stunning view and easy access to the ocean. The first few days we spent exploring the island, trying out local delicacies and simply enjoying each other's company. We took leisurely walks along the beach, watched the mesmerizing sunset, sipped tropical drinks, and watched the waves and just soaked in the beauty of our surroundings. As our last day in Hawaii approached, I couldn't shake this itch to hit up a local nightclub. I'd heard amazing things about Hawaii's nightlife and was dying to experience it firsthand. When I brought it up to Richard, he seemed unsure at first. I get it, we'd been joined at the hip throughout the trip. But I was determined, or should I say stubborn. I told Richard I really wanted to check out the club, and he eventually agreed to come along. However, I made it clear that I needed some space to enjoy the night on my terms. So we got dressed, hailed a cab, and headed to the club. Inside, the music was loud, the crowd was lively, and the energy was infectious. I immediately hit the bar and started drinking. I had told Richard I needed space, so he headed off on his own, but I think not too far that he couldn't keep an eye on me, though. I think he eventually stopped watching me. Before we got to the nightclub, Richard had warned me to watch my alcohol intake, as we both knew I was a lightweight. I had agreed at first, but then the moment I got to the nightclub, I hit the bar. It had started with me just wanting one drink, and then I couldn't stop. I totally ignored Richard's advice about drinking responsibly. I kept guzzling drinks at the nightclub, not caring about getting too drunk. It tasted good, and I was having fun, or so I thought. If Richard had stuck around, he would have stopped me from going overboard, but I guess he figured I needed space. As the night went on, I got bolder. I was dancing with strangers, laughing and feeling carefree. Each drink made me feel more alive and daring. It was like I couldn't stop. I was caught up in the party atmosphere. Richard probably gave up trying to keep an eye on me, thinking I needed some time to myself. But looking back, if he had stayed close, maybe I wouldn't have gone overboard like I did. I was so wasted when I hit it off with this guy at the club. Honestly, I can barely recall his face or remember anything substantial about him, though I do know that he must have been attractive. We didn't bother with introductions or exchanging details like names or numbers. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing fueled by booze. We met on the dance floor, started dancing together, and then headed back to the bar together to get some more drinks after a few minutes of dancing. With each drink, I felt bolder, and the idea of taking this stranger back to my hotel room seemed very appealing. I pitched the idea to him, and surprisingly, he was up for it, and we ditched the club without looking back. The trip back to the hotel is all a fuzzy mess in my mind. I guess he wasn't as wasted as I was, which made things go smoother. We ended up in my hotel room, and things quickly got heated, and we proceeded to have sex. It was a reckless, alcohol-fueled action that I can barely recall. It's all just a jumble of blurry memories. I have no idea when we stopped or even fell asleep. It was all a drunken blur. The morning after, I woke up pretty late and with a pounding head, and the realization of what I'd done slapped me hard right in the face. The stranger had already left, which is something I was thankful for because, to be honest, I didn't even want to even see who I had cheated with. But I was a real mess, both inside and out. The room was a disaster zone, which just perfectly reflected the chaos in my mind. I knew I had to clean up fast. I was hoping against hope that Richard hadn't seen the aftermath of my mistake or that he hadn't walked in on us somehow. My hands were shaking. I frantically tidied up, trying to erase any trace of the stranger's presence. Each moment felt like an eternity as I scrubbed away at the mess on the bedsheet. I was praying for some kind of divine intervention to fix what I had done. Even though I knew Richard could hold his liquor very well, I was hoping Richard had someone gotten very drunk after I left the party and couldn't make his way back to the hotel room, or he left with someone else, because then that would erase the possibility that he walked in on the stranger and I. Then after I was done with cleaning, I decided to call Richard so as to know where he was. I dialed his number with trembling fingers. My heart was racing, but his phone was switched off, which kind of added to my mounting anxiety. What if he had come back and seen everything? The thought made my stomach churn with dread. I continued to hope and pray for a way out of this mess, but if I had found a way out of that mess or avoided it altogether, I wouldn't be here telling you guys my story. Every minute without hearing from Richard made my heart race faster. I kept imagining the worst scenarios. Maybe he had been in some kind of accident. Maybe he had come to the hotel room and found me and the stranger. They were all playing out in my mind like a horror movie. I couldn't also shake off the guilt that maybe my actions had driven him away. Maybe he had actually seen everything, and it made him hate me so much that he didn't even want to talk to me. The fact that his phone was switched off felt like a very deliberate move, a way of shutting me out completely. With each passing hour of silence, my nerves were shot. I tried calling and texting him repeatedly, but there was still no response. It got to a point I was thinking of calling his parents. Looking back now, I realized that my frantic cleaning had blinded me to the obvious signs. If I had taken a moment to really look around the hotel room earlier, maybe I would have picked up on clues about Richard's disappearance. But guilt and shock had clouded my judgment. We were supposed to leave the next day, and Richard was nowhere to be found. I decided to start packing our bags, and that was when I freaked out even more. At this point, I was now trying to hold back tears as I packed. Richard's stuff was nowhere to be found, not a single sock, toothbrush, or shirt in sight. This wasn't some temporary absence. He had deliberately taken everything. Richard had left me in Hawaii. It made my heart ache with regret and fear. I was freaking out, plain and simple. The realization that Richard had left me in Hawaii was very painful. It was a gut punch. I knew that he must have seen what happened between me and the stranger. There was no way he would have walked out on me like this if he hadn't witnessed the betrayal firsthand. How could I have been so reckless, so stupid? I knew I had to start packing. There was no point in staying in Hawaii any longer. I had to go back home and face the music. The thought of facing Richard's disappointment made me feel sick to my stomach. But there was no turning back now. I had to face the music and own up to my mistakes. I hurriedly packed my belongings, booked my flight, and checked out early. I arrived at the airport and I felt like a mess inside. I tried calling Richard again and again, but he just wouldn't pick up. I boarded the plane back home. I couldn't shake off this sinking feeling in my gut. It was a long flight. I was exhausted and had a terrible headache, but let me spare you guys my ramblings. Finally landing, I rushed to our house. I was hoping to find some answers, or at least a familiar face. But the silence when I knocked on the door was deafening. No one answered. Panic started to creep in. I called Richard once more, and this time he picked up. His voice was so distant and cold. He told me to leave, that my things were already at my parents' place. That hit me like a ton of bricks. How and when did he do that? I tried to call his bluff. There was no way he could have moved my things to my parents' place that quick. But he was deathly serious. He told me no one was home, that I was a fool to take a stranger from the club to our hotel room, and then proceed to cheat on him with the stranger. Even when I tried to defend myself by saying I was intoxicated and could barely remember what happened, he said those were excuses, and he warned me about my alcohol intake. I pleaded with him, trying to make him understand, but it was like talking to a wall. He had made up his mind, and there was no changing it. So with a heavy heart, I turned and headed back to my parents' house, feeling like I had hit rock bottom. Everything and everyone seemed to be moving at lightning speed, yet I felt like I was stuck in slow motion. I still didn't fully understand what had happened in my absence, and that left me with a barrage of questions. Why hadn't anyone called me earlier? Did my in-laws know about what happened? How would I see my son now? By the time I arrived at my parents' place, I felt like a complete mess, and seeing the disappointment in my parents' eyes only made it worse, though I couldn't really blame them. When I confronted my parents about not reaching out to me by calling or even texting to tell me Richard had dropped off my stuff, they explained that they knew I would most likely start heading back to the States, but didn't know when my flight would land. It was a very flimsy excuse, but I was too overwhelmed to argue. They informed me that Richard had dropped off all my belongings and they were stored in my old room. Hearing this only deepened my shame. They showed me to my old room, which was now filled with boxes packed by Richard. It felt like my life had been condensed into those boxes. It felt like everyone was against me. I tried to explain that I was heavily intoxicated, but my parents echoed Richard's sentiments. Being drunk wasn't an excuse for infidelity. They reminded me that if I couldn't handle alcohol responsibly, then I shouldn't have indulged to that extent. Their disappointment was palpable, adding to the weight of my mistakes. My parents told me what Richard had said about the cheating, and it felt like a slap in the face. I wanted to explain, to make them understand how out of control I was, to tell them how drunk I was, but it didn't matter. They, like Richard, saw it as a choice I made, not a drunken mistake. I felt like I was sinking deeper into shame as I unpacked my things. It was a long night of soul-searching and regret, wondering how I could have messed things up so badly. I spent days just crying my eyes out and begging Richard to forgive me, hoping against hope that somehow things would go back to how they were. I thought about reaching out to Richard's folks, but the thought of facing their smug satisfaction made me hesitate. They were always nice but distant, that kind of polite but distant vibe. My siblings tried to console me, but underneath their words I could feel the blame. It was like everyone saw me as the one who messed everything up. I did everything I could to make Richard see how sorry I was, but he wouldn't budge. He kept reminding me about his warnings and how things could have been different if I hadn't pushed him away that night at the club. Even my parents tried to talk some sense into him, but Richard was like a rock, unmoving. He wants a divorce and isn't going to budge. He keeps telling me that I'll get served soon. It took me a while to even gather the courage to post this on Reddit, hoping for some kind of lifeline or advice. The pain of losing everything I hold dear is something I don't wish on anyone, So to anyone reading this, don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't let a stupid moment of recklessness cost you everything. Treasure what you have, talk things out, and never underestimate the fallout of a bad decision, and for the love of everything that is holy, don't fucking cheating. Update. Hey Reddit, I'm honestly blown away by the response to my post. I never expected it to gain so much attention, especially not in such a short time. I posted it from my main account because I didn't think it would blow up like this, and I honestly didn't think many people I know would see it since they're not big on Reddit. I want to address some of the comments and questions I've been receiving. Firstly, I know there have been some really hurtful comments, especially about me using alcohol as an excuse for cheating. I'm not asking for a free pass. I understand that being drunk doesn't justify my actions. I'm just trying to share my perspective and explain what happened. Regarding my son, a lot of you asked if Richard was keeping him away from me since I mentioned in my post that I was worried about not being able to see him. But when I said that I meant not being able to see him every day, that was more about the uncertainty of custody arrangements rather than Richard keeping me away from him. He's actually been very reasonable about letting me see our son, and I appreciate that. In fact, the only times I've seen Richard physically was when he dropped off our son at my parents' house to spend some time with me. Some of you also pointed out inconsistencies or called the story fake. I want to assure you that this is my reality right now, as painful as it is. If there are any gaps or inconsistencies in my story, it's because I wrote it during a very emotional and difficult time, and I just wanted this as an outlet for how I was feeling. To answer a few common questions, yes, I'm still staying at my parents' place, and the divorce proceedings haven't been finalized yet. Yes, I've suggested therapy, but Richard is only open to it for our son, not for us as a couple. As for financial matters, our joint account is frozen, and I don't have access to it. I can't contest that as it's all Richard's money. And yes, I know I'll need to seek legal advice. I'm going to possibly need financial support from my parents for that. I'm not looking for sympathy or excuses. I know I've made a terrible mistake, and I'm facing the consequences. I just needed a space to share my thoughts and feelings, and I appreciate those of you who have been understanding and supportive. I didn't even think I would be updating it, but I guess here we are. Thanks for reading and for your insights, Reddit. Update. Hey Reddit, I wanted to pop back in and give you all a quick update. So I got served with the divorce papers. It was something I knew was coming, but it hit me hard nonetheless. I couldn't help but cry afterwards. It just made everything feel so real, like Richard was truly done with me because of one mistake I made while I was drunk. On the brighter side, Richard has been more open about letting me see our kid. Our son has been a bit confused by all the changes, so Richard is considering therapy for him. He's even sent me a few options for therapists, which I appreciate. Despite everything, he still involves me in decisions regarding our child. Richard has also explained things to our son in a simple way, assuring him that things won't change too much and that he'll still have both of us, just in different houses. It's a small comfort because I know this must be a very difficult and confusing situation for our kid. As for my family, they've toned down the blame game and are now focusing on supporting me. However, they're also feeling the financial strain since Richard has cut off the financial assistance he used to provide them. We'll have to adjust and make it through somehow. Posting here on Reddit has been a bit therapeutic for me, almost like journaling. It helps me process my thoughts and emotions. Now my next step is to seek legal advice. My parents are advising me not to rush into signing the divorce papers and to explore if I have any stake in our assets, like the house. It's a bit ironic considering I signed a prenup that includes a cheating clause. Unfortunately, my parents aren't aware of this yet, but I'll have to tell them eventually. Thanks for reading and for all your support, and yes, including the horrible comments, Reddit. Update. Hey Reddit, I need to update you on what's happening because I'm feeling incredibly overwhelmed right now. I'm holed up in my room listening to my parents' screaming match, which is definitely fun. If my sarcasm isn't coming through, let me be clear, it's far from fun. So my parents just found out about the prenup, and let's just say they're furious. Furious for several reasons. First, it means I probably won't be getting anything from the divorce thanks to the cheating clause in the prenup. It's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing I won't get a claim on the house, especially when it could have helped us financially. They're also angry that I never told them about the prenup and that I signed it without my own lawyer present. I know it was a massive mistake on my part, but I was trying to impress Richard's parents at the time, who, by the way, haven't reached out to me since this mess began. My parents think I was taken advantage of, and they're consulting their lawyer to see if there's any legal recourse, although deep down, I know the answer is likely no. Why are they screaming? Well, my mom thinks my dad was being too harsh on me. She argues that it was my decision to marry Richard and also my decision to sign the prenup. My mom thinks it shouldn't matter to my dad whether I get anything out of the prenup and that my dad is just being greedy. It turned into a heated argument, and I retreated to my room because it was all too much to handle. On a somewhat brighter note, I'm starting to search for a job. Although, let's be honest, it's not exactly a bright side. I've realized how broke I am. I'm relying entirely on my parents for everything. I can't stay here forever, it's just too much. I'm hoping to move out eventually, even though it'll be tough since I haven't worked in a long time. But I'll figure it out somehow. So that's where things stand. Thanks for reading, Reddit, and thanks for the support, even if it's mixed with some less than kind comments. Update. Hey Reddit, just a quick update to share some news. I landed my first job interview since I started looking. It's been a bit challenging because most places want experienced candidates, but I'm okay starting at minimum wage and working my way up. It's not ideal, and I honestly hate that it's come to this, but I don't have much choice at the moment. It's kind of crazy, you know? One moment I was living in $1 million house, enjoying a wonderful marriage with a supportive husband, and the next I'm back at my parents' place. One moment I'm in Hawaii, and the next I'm back to reality. Life can be incredibly unpredictable and wild sometimes. Sometimes I think I'll wake up and it'll all be a dream. I've been reflecting a lot on the mistakes I've made, and I truly feel guilty about them. That's why I haven't touched a drop of alcohol since everything happened, no matter how tough things have been and no matter how miserable I've been feeling. Thanks for sticking around, Reddit. The harsh comments have eased up a bit, and I appreciate that. It's been a roller coaster, but I'm taking it one step at a time. Thanks again for reading and for all the support. Update. Hey Reddit, I wasn't planning on giving an update until after the divorce proceedings, but I've been getting a lot of questions about what's going on lately, so here's a little peek into my current life, which honestly feels pretty mundane compared to everything that's happened. Firstly, my in-laws are still radio silent. They haven't reached out, and I'm definitely not reaching out to them either. It's pretty clear they never cared for me much, so I'm sure they're happy to be rid of me. Fine by me, honestly. Secondly, my dad did apologize to me. It came a bit late, but he apologized to both me and my mom. I decided to forgive him, especially since he's been quite supportive throughout all of this. On the job front, I didn't get the interview I went for, which was a bit disappointing, but I'm still actively looking. The divorce proceedings are looming closer, but I'd rather not dive into details while it's still ongoing. It's still a painful process, and I don't want to give you all half-hearted updates. Our son is doing well, thank you for asking. We've found a therapist, but the earliest appointment we could get for our son is about a month from now. Once we've had our first session, I'll fill you all in on how it goes. That's about it for now. Life is slowly settling into a routine, though a very different one from what I was used to. Thanks for all your support and questions, Reddit. I'll update again once everything with the divorce is finalized. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I owe you all an update, and I apologize for not doing it sooner. A lot has happened in these past months, or maybe I should say, a little has happened, so let me catch you up quickly. Firstly, the divorce proceedings have finally been finalized. It took longer than I expected, but it's done now. Unfortunately, the cause my parents hoped would invalidate the prenup didn't work out in my favor. I got nothing from the divorce, which I'm sure makes my husband's parents quite happy. I can almost hear them saying, "I told you so," and lecturing my ex-husband about why prenups are essential. The prenup held up well in court, and I ended up with nothing, not even custody of our child. The lack of custody was particularly painful. I wonder if I should have fought harder for it, but without a stable income, the judge deemed it ironic for me to receive custody. The judge's words were quite blunt. She said it would be ironic for me to get custody because then my husband would have to pay me child support, which still wouldn't be enough without a job. On a positive note, my ex-husband graciously declined to take child support from me. I guess he understood my financial situation, which I appreciate. I've managed to secure a job now, which is a relief. It's nothing fancy, just minimum wage and limited hours, but it's a start. Yes, I'm still living with my parents, but I'm saving up to move out. The housing market is tough as there's a housing crisis, so I'll likely need a roommate to afford a place on my own. Things at home have mellowed down a bit. My dad isn't as insufferable as before, and overall things are okay. Our son is in therapy, and it's been beneficial. He's coping better and understanding things more clearly, which is a huge relief. Life has its ups and downs, but I'm grateful for the support I've received, especially from you all on Reddit. This might be my last update, but I wanted to express my gratitude. You've all helped me through a tough time, and I appreciate it immensely. Thank you.